Hi guys! I hope everyone is back on your seats. Okay, so I hope everyone had a quick water break or restroom break. And now I'm gonna start with part 4 of the 301 Data Analysis and Insights Generation course. So far, what Jillian has done is taken us through the different quantitative and qualitative metrics and analysis that we can do as part of social listening research. So what I'm going to take you through on this part is how to make sense of those different types of analysis that you have done. So what you can do to help guide you to know what are the certain analysis that you need to do is by using the 5 W's as a guide. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with this. We have learned in school or in other sources about, or we have heard this 5 W's before. So basically, analysis that you will do in social listening research will fall in any of the 5 W's. So the 5 W's will be who, what, when, where, and why. So to serve as a guide on how we should understand this concept, we prepare this table which shows sample analysis that we can do for quantitative and qualitative analysis for each of the W, for each who, what, when, where, and why. So by no means these are all the types of analysis that you can do, but these are the most common ones that are part of social listening research. So we're going to take you through each of these in the succeeding slides. But to give an overview, so for who, on a quantitative perspective, this is when we can identify top influencers in terms of follower count, impact score, or engagement count. And on a qualitative sense, we can also identify psychographic audience segments. So these are finding out which type of people are discussing about certain topics. So are they parents, are they students, etc. Next is what. So what is most often qualitative? Because this is where you'll look at top conversation themes or sentiment breakdown in conversations. When it can be quantitative when you're just looking at conversation volume per period, so be it by month, week, day, hour, etc. But it can also be qualitative when you're looking at phases and moments. So when people are experiencing or discussing about certain things. So these are things like life stages, seasons, or moods. Where in terms of social listening, location is not necessarily geographic location. It can also be in which platforms people discuss about certain things. So where can be quantitative analysis of conversation volume per platform or per website where these conversations occur, or an analysis of the conversation volume per country or region. And then lastly, why? Why is always qualitative analysis, because this is where we look at things like triggers, barriers, or motivations of people to do certain actions. So we'll take you through each of these examples in the following slides. So to help us understand this framework, let's go back to Sonia. So in the example for this session, let's say she's a social analyst working at a snack company with access to 2020. So imagine that she needs to prepare a research study about snacking trends. So how can she use the 5 W's to guide her data analysis? So for who, on a quantitative type of analysis, she can identify influential figures in the space by sorting the accounts that posted about snacks in terms of impact score. So Jillian has showed us how to do this in a 2020 platform in the earlier section. where we have this feature called top influencers. And if you post them by impact, you will see on top of the table, the accounts or the influencers that have the highest impact scores that are talking about a certain topic. So how is this helpful? Let's say Sonia will be planning how on which influencers to engage for a campaign, so she can use this list to choose which influencers to promote her company's product. So who can also be answered by qualitative analysis. So for example, you're understanding your audience persona. So audience persona, these are categories or segments in terms of psychographics. So you would need to, or Sonia would need to define what each of these segments will be before she can categorize the data in terms of those segments. So for example, in this case, we have the definition of each of the segments on the right side of the slide. So she can she can set that any post about recipes or cooking are from bakers or cooks, and any post about snacking while studying are from students, while posts about snacking while watching movies or shows are from movie watchers. While those that talk about preparing or buying snacks for their kids are likely moms or parents. And lastly, those that post about healthy snacks are called health buffs. So it's really up to the analyst to identify these segments and to define these segments. So before you can identify these segments, you need to have looked through your data first, because that's the only way for you to know what are the segments available in your data. Next is what. So what is generally always done in a qualitative analysis methodology. So Jillian has showed us this feature in 2020 earlier. So if you want to break down key conversation themes, you go into the top topics feature in the insights section. So let's for this example, we looked at the top topics graph for snacking related conversation. So we see that the top themes that people are talking about are bakery products, healthy food, promotion, sales giveaways, product launch, etc. And again, we know that the color codes stand for sentiment. So the green ones are primarily positive conversations, while the gray ones are neutral, and we don't see much red here. So there aren't much negative conversations about snacking. What can also be an analysis of sentiment breakdown. So a breakdown of positive, negative, or neutral percentage of conversations. And we can easily see this in 2020 by going into the sentiment tab in our insight section. So when, on a quantitative standpoint, it can be about identifying the specific time of interest when people are discussing about certain topics. So be it by hour, day, month, or quarter. So as Jillian has introduced, we can see this from the conversation over time graph in 2020. So once Sonia or the analyst generates this or looks at this graph, the next step can be identifying what caused these spikes. So we're looking at the data for the past 30 days, and we see that there are two main spikes on March 17 and March 27. So the next thing that we can do is right click on this, view conversations, and see what are the exact things that people are talking about that caused these spikes. So in our case study, Sonia is creating a report about conversation trends, right? So this can help her identifying the cause of the spikes, can help her identify certain trends that are occurring in the data. So those topics that people are talking about during these peaks are likely trending topics because they caused such um, volume peaks to occur. And then on a qualitative sense, when is when you're identifying specific seasons, phases, or moments that people are talking about or doing certain things. So for example, in snacking, we can identify certain consumption moments or moments when people would likely snack. So in this example, we see that most of the conversations are related to surprises. So people giving snacks as a gift when they're surprising their friends or loved ones. And it's also being spoken in relation to seasons or occasions such as Ramadan or birthday. And it's also used by people for certain functional benefits such as for stress relief, as we can see here. Next is where. So again, as I said earlier, where in the social listening type of research, it doesn't necessarily mean geographic location all the time. It can also be about which platforms people are discussing about certain things. So in this example, we're looking at the channel analysis feature in the 2020 platform. And we can see that in this example, most conversations are coming from Twitter, followed by Facebook, then Instagram. And of course, where also means where in the world people are located, people who are talking about certain topics located. So 2020 has this feature called Mentions Map, wherein you can see which countries or which regions most people are located. So in this example, this is a mentions map of Malaysia. So we can see that most conversations are coming from these regions, which are the capital and also the Sarawak region. So the darker, as we can refer to the legend here, the darker the area, the more conversations are coming from that place. And then lastly, why? Why is always done in a qualitative analysis? Because this is when we look at things like triggers, barriers, motivations behind people's decision to do certain things, and also the cultural context that influences those decisions. So in this example, we're looking at factors of consideration for product purchase. So what influences people to choose certain brands to buy. So here we identified 8 factors, and similar to psychographic segments, the analyst also needs to define each of the factors so that you can do this analysis. So here we looked at the data and we saw that there are 8 main factors that affect people's choice of brand to buy. So it's things like accessibility. So accessibility, we categorize under accessibility any post about availability of products in stores or online shopping. While posts about taste, we categorize under flavor. And there are also people who are encouraged to buy the product because of online reviews. And we categorize it under good reviews online, etc. So same with analysis for psychographic segments, for why analysis, or when you're looking at factors, triggers, barriers, motivations, etc., you also need to define the segments by which you will categorize the data with. Okay, so to wrap up this section, a few notes to remember. Number one is you don't have to answer all the 5 W's in every report. So what will dictate which W's will be relevant for you are your research objectives. So this has been reiterated by Jillian in the previous section and also during the 101 course, that research objectives will really be your guide or your reference for the entirety of your research from start until the end. And anything that does not answer these objectives is therefore not needed in your report. So before we go into the next section, we'll have another quiz, third quiz for today's session to see what you have picked up in the session that we just went through. So again, we have three questions. First question, why questions can be answered by which type of data analysis methodology? Is it quantitative or qualitative? And then next, what does the conversation over time graph in 2020 help you uncover? Is it when people posted about a certain topic or top influencers about the topic? And then third, which metric can you use to identify top influencers about a certain topic? Is it gender information or impact score? Okay, so now let's go through the answers. So the first question, why questions can be answered by which type of data analysis methodology? All of you got it right. It's called qualitative. So why questions are always answered by qualitative data analysis. Number two, what does the conversation over time graph in 2020 help you uncover? Yes, all of you got it right again. It's when people posted about a certain topic. And then lastly, which metric can you use to identify top influencers about a certain topic? All of you got it right. It's impact score. So again, to reiterate what Julian has taken us through in the last section, impact score is an engagement-based metric. So those that get the highest impact score means those are the ones that get the highest engagements, and you can use that to identify the top influencers posting about a certain topic. Okay, so before we go into the last part, we'll just answer one question in the chat. Please clarify how the factors are derived. So this is about, let's just go back. So this. So you can derive, before you identify what these factors are, you really need to look through the data. So Jillian has taken us through the steps whereby we which we can use to identify the factors. So she took us through two main methods, right? So the first is either we can create a collection in 2020 and group together similarly themed conversations, or you can also choose to download a sample a sample of the data set, maybe like a random 300 mentions or a certain percentage of the mentions, and then you can categorize in Excel itself. But the first main step, or the first step for you to identify these factors, is really to look through the data set. So you really need to read the data. So like in this example, we look through a sample of the data set, and you really have to qualify you need to read each mention. What are they talking about? So for example, if they're talking about, oh, I like this product because I can easily buy it from 7-Eleven, then that's counting under availability. So you categorize it under availability. But if it's talking about, oh, I like their new variant, it's so sweet, I like the taste, then you can categorize it under flavor. So you really need to look through the data. Okay, we're just reading some more questions. Direct. We're just stressed. So just to share with everyone, so other questions that that were pinged is, conversations may not directly pertain to consideration for purchase. They may be just comments on something they have tasted or something they were given, not specific to purchase choice. So yeah, you only categorize mentions that will fall under this. So it's not, we're not saying that for this example there are 8 factors that all of the mentions in that data set fall under this 8. So of course, there are some there are some mentions that can be just, random posts about like, um, um, I like this product because it reminds me of my childhood, or I like this product because something else that aren't about this factor. So if the mention is not about factors of consideration for product purchase, then you don't need to categorize it. You only need to categorize those that are about these factors. So yeah, that's how you will do it. So you won't necessarily categorize, you won't necessarily be able to categorize all mentions.
Okay, so if I can just jump in here also on that question. So like what Kay said, right? There is that pool of question and we want to look at very specific things that I want to look at. So if in this case you want to look at considerations for purchase, and we have come up with, based on the entirety of conversation, we've come up with a subset, which is consideration for purchase. But I think Siu Hong, you're saying that not all conversations might be tied to consideration to purchase, right? Because it might just be comments about a taste or flavor. Does that really mean that that is why they're considering to purchase? And I think that is something that's so unique about social media conversations, which is that when people are tweeting about it, it's likely something that made them, it's an active action on their part, right? So when they are actively saying, oh, I like this flavor, it definitely is something that made them happy, or they're not explicitly saying that they are purchasing because of the flavor, but flavor is really something that made that tick the why that they are purchasing, and that's why they're doing it. So it's not just that case. When they're talking about flavors, it also expands the reach as to who's looking at that also. So I think there's a lot of parts that come to play in this. But when it comes to social analytics, the assumption I'll say here is that when people are talking about these aspects more frequently, it's likely that these are the things that really takes the needle with them. Like it's a motivation for them to subsequently consider and purchase. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. So they like the taste after buying, but it is definitely a like plus point for them to want to purchase in the future. We will never know, like never ever know in any sort of research that if they'll purchase or not. So even if we do a traditional research, they say that they will purchase something, like, will you purchase this in the future? Yes, I write that down, but it's not a case that I will definitely purchase it at the end of the day. So this is more of an inference, and based on like human behavior, what can we like infer based on the set assumptions that we have about social media conversations.
Yeah, that point is right. Like everything is an inference. Like even if a person takes a photo of a product and says that they bought it, we can really be sure that they really bought it. Maybe someone, gave it to them as a gift, or they got it as a freebie from somewhere. But you have to like infer certain things in social listening. Like not everything will be direct to the point, because people don't really discuss or post things in that manner in social media.
So I think that's the premise of most research also, is that it will always be within the confines of a couple of assumptions there. Okay, maybe we can continue with the discussion after the whole section, because I think this might take a while. So instead of taking a Q&A in the middle of the section, why don't we move on to the next part of this syllabus first before we continue with this?
Yeah. Thanks, Julian, for that support.